Forging cyber security Secure Ninja.
Hey everyone, I'm Alicia Webb with SecureNinjaTV. Now, our free preview of SecureNinja's online Sensei series has generated such a positive reaction that we've decided to give away every single module from this Cyber Kung Fu course featuring Larry Greenblatt, Tom Updegrove, and me. If you like what you see and would like to experience a Secure Ninja training course in person at any of our training locations, we have some amazing time-sensitive specials for you. Just visit SecureNinja.com/specials for all of the do not miss deals. And now, here is your free module from Cyber Kung Fu for the Certified Ethical Hacker version 8. Enjoy.
All right, let's get started. Now remember, this is to help you understand your book. So you're going to be able to go through each module, and when you read their book, hopefully this will help you understand each of these modules in greater depth. So their introduction to ethical hacking, actually all of their modules are going to start off with a lot of very contextual stories, and they're very interesting to learn from, to put things in the proper perspective. They also end almost every module with a series of tools, and they're great. I love that. That's my favorite part of their books, is that you have such a great reference of tools. For brevity, I'm not going to go through those tools, just a couple of highlighted things. But I do want to put some context and give our spin on how we see each of these domains. So the objective really is we have an infrastructure, right, Alicia? And I'm also going to be referencing John in the background, our director. What we have, we're protecting our information. I've got things personal, I got things in the business that are important to me. Security, most people think of as confidentiality. And I always argue, well, I may toss it out to John and Alicia. Have either of you ever hidden something so well that you yourselves forgot where you put it?
Oh, yeah.
All right, there's a problem with confidentiality, right? Mm-hmm. We also want to make sure, for example, if I drop my car off at the parking lot, when I pick it up, it hasn't been tampered with. So I want to make sure that things have been, my information or whatever hasn't been tampered or integrity. But I argue that the most important security goal is availability. So, it flies in the face of a lot of security people, but honestly, I do want my bank records protected. Yes, absolutely. I don't want unauthorized people seeing this, but it is way more important to me when I go to the ATM, I can get my money, right? So, again, my perspective is always from a network ops guy. I've created by accident denial of service attacks, and people were like, oh, you could be famous. And I was like, no, I don't want to be famous for that. When I walk into a building, I want to be the guy who helped make it more available. That's the guy who made it faster. So, but I learned these things. I like to play around. Security goals then are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And to protect that, well, we always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we try to prevent certain things from happening, but I can't prevent everything. I can't prevent some natural disasters. I can't even prevent HR people from looking up HR records so they can peek into personally identifiable information, because that's how they get their job done. So we also have detection and response. So maybe I can't prevent the HR people from looking at it, but if I look at the log and I go, Bob, why did you look up every employee at 9:30 in the morning and download that? That doesn't seem like normal usage. So I could detect patterns of abuse. And then response, it's like, do you ever hear like a car alarm blinking in the middle of the night and no one goes out? Well, what good is the alarm? So borrowing from Bruce Schneier, he says, you got a safe. It prevents you from getting to my money, but safes don't last forever. In fact, all preventive controls, that's the same as your encryption algorithms, really just add a time barrier. So if the safe is rated 60 TLTR, it's good for 60 minutes with the best tools in a torch. I need alarms that ring when somebody gets to the safe. And I need guards that show up within 60 minutes. And that's what the security processes are. So again, our goals, confidentiality, integrity, availability, our processes, prevention, detection, response. And remember, you can't prevent everything. So it's all about risk management. And risk management, we said earlier, it is really unforeseen danger. And how do I deal with that? What are the ways I could prevent, detect, and respond to that? Well, I can test it. Like as a martial artist, I want to see if that would really work. And I can remember, let me show you something. It's kind of funny. I can remember learning karate as a kid, and I learned how to get out of a choke. So if someone is choking me, I would step up, block their arms. That makes their arms go flying. And then I could chop them in the neck and then palm strike them. And now I know how to do it because every time we tried, boom, 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 it worked. But I have friends from North Philly. Again, I'm from the neighborhood. They go, let me see you work, Randy. Go ahead. And they're choking. And their hands don't move. And I realized, didn't work that way. So you have to test these things. That's why we have fire drills. But no test is the real thing. I don't know too many people light fires in their fire drills. And even in a no-holds-barred fight, where, the MMA is so popular today, they certainly bar holds. You're not allowed to bite. And if my daughter came home and somebody attacked her, and I said, what'd you do? I gouged his eyes out with my keys, something you can't do in the UFC. I'd high-five her. So testing is important, but it's not real life. It's just the best we can do. And you're not making money when you're running a test. There's a big debate, what is the value of penetration testing? And I consider it a lot like sparring. And Bruce Schneier and Marcus Rainham did a talk on this, pretty funny. And Marcus Rainham says it's a complete waste of time. But Bruce Schneier says, no, I disagree. I think it's only mostly a waste of time. I want my police to learn how to spar. If you're going to be in the military and you're ever going to get hit, you need to know it. But if I'm teaching really risk management physically, I'm teaching Tai Chi, most of my students are over 70, having these people spar will not reduce risk. All right? So I agree with Bruce Schneier. I want the banks pen tested. Anything where there's a high risk of either loss of life, and think about that. One of the most vulnerable places is probably a hospital. Because I don't want to be the pen tester there that goes, all right, I ran the scan. Oh, wait, that's the wrong IP address. And a life support system had to be rebooted, and Bob didn't reboot. Yeah. So it's very scary. For the test, they have some hacker classes you'll need to know. Now, some are kind of intuitive. White hat's the good guy. I've heard that for years. Black hat's the bad guy. A gray hat's somewhere in the middle. And my good friend Ralph H. Mendia one time pointed out, he goes, I don't know any black or white people, dude. So I understand his point there. But a term I've never heard outside of these circles is a suicide hacker. And they're referring to hacktivists, people who are, I don't care if I get caught. This is just really important to me. So they're not afraid to go into jail. And then we want to understand the basic phases of, well, how a real attack would work, and how we try to imitate that in our test. But just like in a real martial arts, I could bite, we're not going to bite our eye gouge, right? All right, so again, our fundamental goals, I always put availability at the top. It's just, I did a lot of work in disaster recovery, and I find that that's the biggest problem in disaster recovery. It's always the availability metrics that people didn't consider. We're not worried about keeping things secrets. It's where are the blankets? Where are the food? Where's shelter? How do we get this? So, but it's probably not important on the test to remember in order. Now, a lot of times, and I remember this was true when martial arts were coming out in the 60s. I'm an old guy. And when you first started hearing about karate, they were trying to scare you on TV. There are attackers at every corner. As an adult, I have never needed to be in a fist fight. Most of my problems in life are my own damn fault. The reason I showed up at the doctor's, well, I had some dental problems, and it's because I'm not flossing properly or whatever. I have shown up at an emergency room a number of times from sparring injuries. Now think about the paradox there. I've had my nose, my finger, my thumb, toes, multiple ribs. Tom broke my leg once. And it's kind of common. They said, well, how did you hurt yourself, Mr. Greenblatt? Learning to defend myself. I think you missed something. And this is true to business. A lot of times security guys come off like TSA to people. They're like strangling business with their stupid rules. So we don't want to do that. They have a punch is coming right to my nose. I only got to move 4 or 5 inches on either side. It's a lot more efficient. Far more likely are accidents. So I said a couple times, but I love the quote from Bruce Schneier that the difference between safety engineering and security engineering is safety engineering deals with Murphy's Law. If something could go wrong, eventually it will. Security engineering deals with Satan's Law. If something could go wrong, some malicious son of a is going to do it. And security is dealing with both. We have to consider both of these. You just have to consider fatigue too. Bob can get this much work done in 8 hours. Doesn't mean he can get twice as much work done in 16 hours, right? We put a lot of people at risk doing that. Work overtime, and these doctors, we don't have enough surgeons and stuff. And it's the same with any technology. That printer's good for whatever 20 pages per minute, but not 60 minutes by 24 hours a day, right? And legal liabilities. I have people who told me with all the new laws concerning information security, guy says, he writes up ROI, and he says, now we don't use that for return on investment. We use it for risk of imprisonment. Because there's new laws. If you didn't know, you're breaking this new law. Oh, you're using instant messaging and you have business enabling stuff there? Did you know you have to log that? No, I didn't know that. But overall, probably the most important thing, and I think so many security people get it, and miss it, I should say, that the TSA misses this, the cost of or cost to quality. And I like to illustrate it with cables. We all know that fiber optic cable is far more secure from both confidentiality, availability, and integrity than unshielded twisted pair. But I wouldn't recommend that everybody throw out their unshielded twisted pair because it's appropriate and it's far less expensive. So don't over-secure anything. I don't walk around in body armor. I accept certain risks because it makes sense. All right, so what is an ethical hacker? I said we've got our black, white, gray, and remember for the test, I never heard outside of here, but remember our semantics of business vocabulary. If you're going to come to terms with anybody, whether it's a customer or a test, you have to understand their vocabulary. And they use the term suicide hacker, and again, that's somebody who's not afraid to go to jail. So again, this is all part of risk management, and risk, again, come from the Greek. My mother told me everything comes from the Greek. They're cliffs under the water. It means unforeseen danger. So hopefully I'm not texting when I'm driving, right? So cyber means to steer. But I have to understand there's going to be dangers that I can't see. And I have to be ready to try to prevent, and I can't always. I can prevent it maybe if somebody else went there before, or if I hit it before. So somebody might have told me they want a map, don't go there. That was the purpose of a lighthouse, don't hit these. But if I go somewhere where no one else was, I chart new waters, I have to know you might hit it. So you better have a lifeboat, right? You better have a guy, a lookout, monitoring for problems. It's a basic concept in quality improvement that continuous process improvement requires continuous monitoring. And that's become a big thing in the government over the last 3-4 years. They used to go, all right, we'll audit periodically and then patch. We'll audit once a year and then patch. Now it's continuous monitoring. Got to do that. You often hear people say you got to do your diligence and due care. Well, due diligence is to think before you act, right? But if you don't take action, it's really pointless. So there's a really funny commercial from the Royal Bank of Scotland. I don't know if either of you guys remember this, but there's a guy choking at a dinner table, and another guy says, "Oh, you know what Schmitty needs? Heimlich maneuver." Yep, studied it in school. What happens is food gets stuck. Now this guy did the due diligence, but he's just sitting there. So the other guy's going to die, and then somebody else karmically, performs the Heimlich maneuver, and that food lands on his lap, and he goes, "See, I told you, Heimlich maneuver." So you have to do something. Now, when you do something, we can't always prevent it. A lot of times people think, oh, well, we accepted the risk, we didn't do anything. No, 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 that's negligence. Acceptance of a risk means I accepted I couldn't prevent it. I can't prevent fire all the time. But the fact that I have smoke detectors and evacuation drills means I have detection and response. That's the difference between negligence and actually saying, no, I did my due care. Very quickly here, when you do risk management, an asset is anything you value. And we have different values. I may value guitars more than you do, but consider everybody values what they measure, and everybody measures time and money. So at least protect people's time, protect their money. I always say if you respect somebody, you'll respect their time. All right, now the threat is anything that could cause loss of value. It's not worth as much. That guitar got scratched. Who scratched the guitar? What's the threat? Was it a thief? Was it my daughter playing with it? So what caused the fire? The threat is fire. Was it the sun? Was it an arsonist? The vulnerability would be that this guitar is made of wood and will burn. So if I did a threat analysis and I said, all right, we got fire, we have a flood, I look at my wrenches at home and I go, I'm not worried about my crescent wrenches burning. They're not vulnerable to that. The risk then is that the likelihood some negative thing would happen and the impact of it. Be careful. We're going to use tools later on, do vulnerability scans. You're vulnerable to this, that, and the other thing. How much will it impact me? I don't know. That's one of the most important pieces of a risk assessment, and particularly what we're doing here in a penetration test. We want to just not tell you you're vulnerable, you got to help them understand the impact. What would happen? Now, my mother is Irish, my father's Jewish. My mother is very vulnerable to sunburn, but she doesn't get sunburn because she doesn't expose herself to the sun much. So if that SQL server is vulnerable to whatever SQL injection attack, but it's on the corporate intranet, not available on the internet, it's a lower risk because it's not as exposed. That makes sense? If somebody did exploit it, we have an incident. And that's made up of one or more events. And when something goes wrong, that's typically what forensics is all about, event correlation. Well, Bob noticed this, and Alice saw that, and we got this event on the camera, and there was a strange car in the parking lot, and you figure out what happened. And our controls, our safeguards, our measures, our countermeasures are ways that we could prevent, detect, or respond to these risks. All right, when I do my analysis, some things I can add up and be certain of what I've added up. So quantitative analysis, where I have actual quantities of money, quantities of whatever, how many password resets I had to do last year. These are when I have objective metrics. And when it's objective means that anybody could look at this. It doesn't matter. The number is just an object. Everybody, like my guitar is an object. You would always measure quantities the same. We would all say that has 6 strings. The problem is we're dealing with future prediction here. So I'm going to do my risk assessment. How much problem will I have next year? The best future prediction I know in the world is the weather. And they don't know day to day what's going to happen. Spock can tell you the real temperature now. He can tell you the real wind direction. He can tell you the real quantitative measurement of humidity. But I just Spock, Kirk saying, Spock, is it going to rain tomorrow? And he'd say insufficient data, because you can't measure everything. So at a certain point, you have to stop and say, look, all right, this is where we're going to go. And this is where I say Kirk comes in with his subject. So if the guitar is an object, whoever plays it is a subject. And they're going to play it differently, depending on their experience, depending on what they like in music, right? Depending on what they feel is good. And Kirk does that all the time. He'll do things that other Starfleet captains wouldn't do, because even though Scotty's one of them, Captain, I wouldn't push it past warp 8, the dilithium crystals could just disintegrate. Kirk will be like, I feel we've got a Spock, or Kirk, Spotty, whatever. And he'll accredit. So if Spock can be certain, he can certify. But accredit, it comes from the Greek. It means to believe. He just believes that is good enough. And he knows that he doesn't know everything. So a lot of times we do brainstorming. And I love to tell this story. First time I learned brainstorming. Right, so it's 1990, and I go to work at Wang Laboratories, right? 91. And I go to work at Wang Laboratories, and I'm so excited. It's the first time my mother's heard of the company I work for, right? So we're going to learn, actually this was when business process reengineering was out, and Wang had their own flavor of that called quality leadership process. Now I worked for Computerland, Micro Age, but now I'm at Wang Laboratories. My mom took half my business cards and she was giving them out to people. This is what Larry's doing now. So I'm all excited. I go to a 13-week class on this. It's 1 day a week for 13 weeks, and we broke up into teams. We were going to learn, our team was supposed to increase the customer awareness of Wang's new word processor they developed for Windows. And I start laughing at myself because I came from the outside, and you just now developed a word processor. You know, we have, at that time, WordPerfect was still #1. We could all see that Microsoft Word was going to take it. We had WordStar, we had Multimate. There was no need for this, so I thought this was stupid. Now we learned brainstorming. We broke up into teams, and this was our team's goal. We had to come up with ways to increase awareness. And the rules of brainstorming is somebody was to be designated as the scribe, and he's going to accept people's opinion. Just call out whatever you think, whatever comes to mind. I don't want to hamper your creativity. And don't worry, we'll go back later and critique it as a group. So I'm allowed to say whatever I want, and I'm a wise guy, so I raise my hand. Yes, Larry. Get a giant statue of a dude that could shoot lasers out of his eyes. He has to write that down. And I break up the meeting. People just start cracking up because, oh, giant statue of a guy. I said dude. Of a dude that could shoot lasers. Come on, people, what else can we do? And now I've ruined it. People were all calling, they're acting silly. And one lady said something that actually she meant well. She said, why don't we get t-shirts with the logo of the product on the shirt and we could wear it to customer site. But in 1990, you didn't wear t-shirts, you wore suits. And he's already pissed off and he just goes, no, that would just be stupid. He broke the rules of brainstorming. It is very unlikely you're going to get an honest opinion from somebody who thinks they're going to be punished for their opinion. Why are we losing so much money around here? What can we do to increase the bottom line? I know, boss. How about if you and your wife stop taking so many vacations and writing them off as business expenses? You're fired. Get out of here. Come on, people. What can we do? So the Delphi method is a form of brainstorming that requires anonymity, and it allows people to, anonymously give what they want. And that's a challenge on the internet. I don't know what anonymity is anymore. Schneier pointed out something neat. He said that if you just look at someone's top six search terms, you could find them wherever they are. Isn't that awesome? So I don't know what anonymity is anymore, but that's the idea. All right, so we're going to look at the different threats that could happen to our information system, and then our job here is to try to break it, see if we can find vulnerabilities, ethically hack it to make recommendations on how to improve it. And this, again, is going to be looking at people, looking at the equipment they use, looking at the operating systems they have, looking at the applications they use. And even if they fully patched everything, if you left your administrative password as password, well, you're probably very vulnerable. So vulnerability assessment is when we just take a look and say, hey, maybe in a martial arts thing, I say, let me see how you stand. Let me see how you hold your hands. And you want to keep that rear hand in front of your chin. I always point that out because a lot of people, you learn karate, you learn like these blocks, but in boxing, we don't block. If a punch is coming to this side of my head and I block it, I just exposed this. And we know we want to mitigate exposures. So we actually shield. We keep that hand in a steady place, and it's our shield, and I'll move my head behind my shield. So, and we do this physically. You can just say, dude, can I pick the lock? Operationally, could I call the help desk and just get them to reset a password claiming to be somebody? Or electronic, can I sniff you in your wireless in the parking lot, or whatever, a SQL injection from over the internet? We identify weaknesses so we can get improvement. And again, that's the same point of sparring. When we spar, we see it all the time. I've been doing this, studying martial arts since I was a teenager. And some people want to go and show off how hard they can hit. And that guy doesn't show up much. That's not helping anybody. Your job is to help your partner get better, right? So penetration testing, now I said, you're holding your hands too low. They don't believe me. Boom. Oh, I penetrate the vulnerability. Actually, I've had that happen to me. That's why I hold my hand this high. And actually, his name is Carl Vincent. He was the #3 ranked boxing, in the would have been 79, #3 ranked middleweight in the world. Carl, I love you, brother. You broke my nose. I never forgot to do that. Now, when I do a vulnerability assessment and I know about something, and maybe you gave me, and I've done a few vulnerability assessments where people give me Visio diagrams. They let me have administrative access, and I can run Nessus tools, and it sets off IDSs, and I can interview their administrators. I'm done my work very quickly. That's sometimes called a blue team exercise. But I might find vulnerabilities because I have inside knowledge. And it might be cheaper to leave them because you go, yeah, but would an outsider really be able to find that? So that's what a pen test is generally associated with, is what's called a black box test. These red teams, they have very limited information about the target. We might also hear of a gray box where maybe they're emulating not an outsider, but what could Bob from accounting discover about purchasing or something like that? All right, so NIST has some guidelines on how we should do this, and I like to use NIST as a backgrounder for me. When you go to court and someone says, well, why would you do it that way? Because that's what the National Institute of Standards and Technology suggested. Good answer. So we're going to understand what is testing, review some of the techniques. We're going to talk about passive and active reconnaissance, but I need to know who works there, what machines, what applications, what operating systems, what vulnerabilities. To validate that vulnerability, you exploit it. That's the pen test. And then we assess them. We tell people, here's what I would do, right? And the post-activity is the most important thing. This was the risk that Schneier and Marcus Rainham both agreed. Imagine you get a report now, and you found a lot of bad things. First of all, Marcus Rainham's point is, you know why you have a lot of bad things in anybody's infrastructure? Because it's poorly managed. You know what poor managers do with documents of vulnerabilities? Nothing. Now, not only would a hacker love to get a hold of that document, because all the hard work's been done, but imagine something goes wrong, and you're litigated a year later. Didn't you have a penetration test done last year? May we see it? Oh, so you knew going back 9 months that you had, quote, a critical flaw that could lead to a substantial leakage of customer personally identifiable information. and yet you elected to do nothing. So it's a very risky thing. If you're going to have something done, you better follow up and do something about it, or else it's pointless. It's actually much worse. Right? Now, a very important control, just like when we spar, you have to understand, what are we allowed to do? What does sparring mean to you? So in our school, we noticed that elbows and stuff and knees, very risky for people. You're going to get hurt. There's no padding on there. So you've got to be a black belt before you're even allowed to show somebody, hey, I could have hit you with the elbow. Make sense? I'll go full contact. If you have 16-ounce gloves, I don't want those 4-ounce UFC gloves that protects your knuckles and not my face. So before you get started, have this spelled out. So what IP addresses can I test? And my good buddy Clement Dupuy pointed out that customers don't always know what they have. So you always validate that, Larry. I had a customer who only owned the entire C block, but he only owned 8 IP addresses. The other customers were not very happy with my taste. Are there any restricted hosts within that range? What techniques? Like, I wouldn't test for a distributed denial of service attack. The answer is it will likely work, so let's not do that. When can I test? I come from a trading background. I wouldn't necessarily test during trading hours. When is the test over? Because after 2 weeks, the guy's thinking, oh, you know what else I'd like to do? No, it's done. All right. And oh, this is so important. I had a guy tell me if he had thought of this, he would have avoided a big problem. The IP addresses of the machines from where the pen testers are coming from. So because, Larry, I knew we were having a test done. It was a red team exercise, so only I knew, my people were not to know. My guys came up and they said, we're under attack. And I said, all right, I'm not supposed to tell you guys, but this is actually no, that was a real attack, simultaneously happened at the same time. And if he knew the IP addresses of the machines that were coming from, he would have been able to discern that. Suppose I'm sparring and I'm doing my best. I pull punches. I'm not hitting anybody, but things go wrong. That's the risk of sparring. You can get hurt. What are you going to do? What if I knock down your mail server? How am I going to quickly mitigate that issue? So you got to have points of contact to quickly deal with any problem that arises. I also had a good buddy, I might as well name him. Eric Ouellette told me that he, and I also know Eric Jackson, were doing a physical pen test, or a penetration test, include physical. And you always carry with you a written permission. It's sometimes called the get out of jail free card. Well, they get caught physically breaking in. And all right, well, we're supposed to be there, and they call that number, and that guy doesn't answer. They called the cops. And that's why I told Ralph that story. Ralph goes, yeah, notice it's not called a don't go to jail card, dude. It's great too. They tried to socially engineer him, so they separated him. And one guy comes up and he slaps this big book down. He goes, all right, Eric, your friend told us everything. Why don't you just come clean? I understand he did bill for the 4 or 5 hours that he had to spend in jail too. What will you do with that information? So again, it's very critical that you protect that information. All the hard work's done, so hackers would love it, but so would lawyers. 5 basic phases, and you'll really go through this as soon as you hit system hacking, module 5. So you're actually through all this, and the rest of it is just other vulnerabilities. So we start off with the reconnaissance, and I want to do a lot of it very passive. I'm going to look at Google or whatever, the Internet Archives. Some will be active, and now I'm going to scan with like Nmap, and I'll find live systems, I'll find listening services, I'll do my Nessus or Nexpose or whatever, LandGuard, whatever tool you use to discover vulnerabilities that we identified already. There might be vulnerabilities they don't pick up on it. Just because the vulnerability scanner says it's not doesn't mean it isn't. And vice versa. Just because it says it is, there are false positives. And we'd also, in our enumeration, we're going to understand who uses this system and what things are they sharing. All right. Then in the system hacking module, you're going to gain access as a low-level user. But then you're going to escalate your privileges. Now in module 5, you'll be doing that by cracking a password. But we're going to be doing that. We'll be cracking wireless, we'll be cracking web, we'll be doing all kinds of vulnerability exploitation. Gain access, escalate your privileges, grab the root, maintain the root. You're going to maintain access by planning in backdoors, and we've got quite a few tools come with your toolkit, ProRat, Poison Ivy, a number of things to help you maintain a backdoor access to this machine. And then clear your tracks. So any log event that would have displayed you were there, you want to move that out. All right, and then in a real test, this isn't just a matter of kids trying to break in. This is what separates a professional from some hacker kid, is that you plan out ahead of time. Again, the rules of engagement, your basic test plans, your get out of jail free card, your written permission. Periodically, you're going to be providing reports. And most important, at the end of this, after the sparring match and after I got beat up a little bit, what should I do? What were the worst things? I can't fix everything at once. So what do you think I should work on next? You know, sometimes it's just, for me, it was like cardio first before you get anything, Larry. You do all right and everything else, but at the 30 seconds, you know. So you need some type of mitigation guidance. Actually, on YouTube, there's a great shot of Tom knocking me into next Tuesday. And now I love Bruce Lee's movies. So I was really good at imitating him. One of my favorite lines in Chinese Connection, he's like, "Wah!" Well, that looks good in the movies, but leaving your arm out there is actually very bad. So I just exposed myself as I learned, so I told, bring it back. So it's pretty funny. I throw the punch. Tom grabs my arm. He uses it and hits me so hard. I just go, "Mom, am I ready for school?" I mean, it just knocked me into the next week. You hear people laughing. But at the end of it, he gave me guidance. He goes, "Now, do you see why I did that? When you threw that punch, don't leave it like a hook for me to grab. Pull it right back and reduce your exposure." 842 has actually been superseded by 115, but I just want you to consider some of the things here very quickly. How often should you test? And they have vulnerability scanning like almost continuously, because they said when the vulnerability database is updated, that's like every day now. And here's the job I want. I want a war drive continuously. I would love that. I'm just like blasting gung-ho music. Dude, what are you doing? Working. But it is important that we test regularly. Again, continuous process improvement requires continuous monitoring. And closing it off, NIST has some basic principles that I really believe in. Keep it simple. I love some sophisticated, say, Aikido techniques, but they're very difficult to work versus, say, I'm going to be one of these old guys, you know, Muhammad Ali was still the best fighter. And his best weapon, the jab. Look how simple it is. Very effective. Fail safe. Well, that has different contexts. My garage door is supposed to protect access to my garage, but it has scratched my car. Sometimes our controls get in the way. Bug spray can control the bugs, or you can kill your dog and your kids. So fail-safe may be in physical security. Those electronic locks keep people from coming in and out. But if the electricity goes out because of a fire, fail-safe means fail-open. But in maybe my operating system, when something in ring 0 fails, a device driver fails, anybody can get in. Microsoft blue screens. That's actually a security countermeasure. That's considered failing closed. Make it complete. Don't put a steel door on a straw house. Open design. So this is what Marcus Rainham felt was the most important thing. When you test a penetration test, you're testing someone's operations. Why don't you have a third party test your design before you even do that? Before you get in and say, hey, let's spar, let me see how you fight first. We could save you a lot. Let me go over your design. Now, I'm not going to tell you my keys, but I'll tell you what algorithms I use. Often called separation of duties. At ISO, they call it mutual exclusion. But my developers should not be the same guys that test their work. They should not be the same guys that operate the controls. So security generally does not get to operate things. Security, like if I'm a security manager, I'll work with, say, the sales group to determine what access controls they need on the firewall, but I can't configure that firewall. The firewall admin, the IT guy, does that. But how do I know they didn't give themselves rules that they shouldn't have? I can't prevent that, and when you can't prevent, you detect. So I have the ability to monitor what that operator does. Well, psychologically acceptability, I'm sorry, that's debatable to people. Some people honestly feel that if the TSA doesn't fondle children and make 85-year-old women take off their adult diapers, that's what the terrorists will do. I find that unacceptable. I will not bring my mother through the airport, because if they did that to her, I would probably go psycho. I think what I'd probably do is take out my phone, go to somebody, I want you to record what I'm about to do. And then I would go loopy on that guy. And a layered defense, so I don't put all my security controls at the perimeter, sometimes called having a fortress mentality. I have things inside, so I have firewalls, I have routers, I have access control lists and switches, I have MAC address filters, I have personal firewalls. I have long range punches and kicks, I have elbows and knees, I have tight range joint locks, right? And again, when you hit that cliff, you don't want to hit it again. When you hit that unforeseen danger, if you don't keep a record of the things that went wrong, yeah, it looks embarrassing, but you had all these mistakes, but you know, if you don't learn from history, you're forced to repeat it, so keep a record of that. All right, finally, I just want to give a little plug to my good friend Clement. Sometimes people ask me, where can I get sample, whatever, rules of engagements? Where can I get good reviews on tools? And Clement does a great job for many, many years running professional security testers and giving us the type of information. So I always show people this website. Clement and I, we met each other in 2002, I believe, at a CEH class. And we sat next to each other, and I started heckling the teacher as Clement. So I was like, that's a load of crap. You ever really work with these? Just learn from my book, eh? And the guy turned around. And if you're not from Quebec, I might sound like Clement. For instance, we later worked together, and I got to spoof the receptionist. I called the receptionist, and they go, Daphne, do I have any messages today, eh? Oh, hold on. She starts reading messages. So I said, Daphne, this is really Larry. And she breaks up laughing. She switches me over to Justa, who is also from Quebec. Good morning, this is Justa. Good morning, Justa. It's Clement. How are you today, eh? Larry, you're insane. What is it you want? So it doesn't work all the time. All right, so that's our introduction. There's no labs for this module. Our next module is just going to do a little passive reconnaissance, and Tom will walk you through some labs from now on for every other module. All right, any questions, Alicia?
No, I'm excited to get going.
All right, let's do it. Let's start hacking.
Now we hope you've enjoyed this free module, but there's lots more. The Cyber Kung Fu course has 29 videos in all and will really help build you a solid understanding of the CEH version 8 curriculum. Don't forget, if you prefer to attend one of Secure Ninja's courses in person at any of our training locations, you really need to visit SecureNinja.com/specials for some amazing discounts and other deals. I'm Alicia Webb. Happy training.
Secure Ninja TV is brought to you by SecureNinja.com, a world leader in cybersecurity training and certification. Our master instructors will help build you into a highly skilled and marketable security professional. Secure Ninja, forging cybersecurity experts.